Hello again. It is perhaps a sign of the changing mood in the country that even the BBC are now starting to ask awkward questions about illegal immigration to Britain. There is a groundswell in public opinion which indicates that many people are now saying enough is enough. The news that 1 in 5 of the Albanian men who have arrived across the Channel this year has pretended to be a child probably does not help matters. Robert Jenrick, the immigration minister, tells us that 20% of adult males are now claiming to be children, which is, of course, utterly absurd. This is a scam because unaccompanied children are treated with kid gloves and seldom get deported. The BBC are now trying to find out just how many of the people who are arriving in this country by irregular routes, such as dinghies across the English Channel, are actually being prosecuted. In other words, how many illegal immigrants are there in Britain? Which is a simple enough question, and you might think that the British authorities would have at least some idea of the answer. Apparently they don't. In the description to this video, I give a link to a BBC investigation into this, and it is quite unlike the usual BBC whitewash when it comes to this subject. For example, we read that, and I quote, "Today there is widespread and credible reporting that the English Channel is being used by smuggling gangs as well as refugees." Well, of course, that's perfectly true, but it's not the sort of thing which the BBC usually say. It is reasonable to assume that since the Nationality and Borders Act, passed on June 28th this year, made it an offence to enter the United Kingdom without proper permission, that the police and authorities are aware that 20,000 people have crossed the Channel since that date without going to ports or passing through customs and so on. How many of these people have been arrested, charged and convicted of entering the country illegally? The BBC have asked the police in Kent, who say that they have not arrested a single person for this offence. The Crown Prosecution Service refused to say how many cases there were and suggested the BBC ask the Home Office, which they did, but the Home Office simply refuses to say. The BBC are now making freedom of information requests to obtain the information. I find this simply incredible for several reasons. The first is, of course, that we ordinary people know perfectly well that there have been around 20,000 offences under the Nationality and Borders Act since the end of June. This is the number of people who have set off across the Channel without tickets or passports and entered the United Kingdom without permission. Of that, there is not the least doubt that 20,000 people have broken this law in the most flagrant fashion. I find it extraordinary that none of the agencies who deal with these people are willing or able to say how many arrests were actually made. This leads me to the next point. If arrests and prosecutions are not taking place, despite tens of thousands of people clearly breaking the law, who has decided that these immigrants should not be arrested as soon as they land? Clearly, they enjoy immunity from prosecution, and nobody has any intention at all of taking any action against them. I think this decision must have been made at the top. I think there must have been word sent down from the government or the Home Secretary to give these people an easy ride and not to make life difficult for them. In other words, to turn a blind eye to the fact that they're riding a coach and horses through the law. No wonder they keep on coming. Let's carry out a little thought experiment, shall we? What do viewers think would happen to the endless and ever-increasing flow of immigrants crossing the Channel in this way if every single one of them was arrested on arrival and held in secure camps before they could be brought before the courts? Suppose then, after conviction, as convicted criminals, they were to be immediately deported to France, the country from which they came, because their presence in this country was not considered conducive to the public good. How long do we think it would be before those camped out on the beach near Calais got the message and realised that the game was not worth the candle? A few weeks? A month? Instead of putting them up in 5-star hotels, we might think about setting up camps with basic accommodation in tents, for example, for all able-bodied young men, rather like an army base, without anything fancy and just ordinary plain food, just enough to keep body and soul together. I have been thinking lately about the way that the Chinese deal with things like illegal immigration, and also how they handle Muslim fundamentalists and disorderly protesters and so on. And in the next video I shall be talking about that. Not because I admire the Chinese, but because their methods are so effective that there is seldom any need for them to have to tackle trouble of the sort with which we regularly see in this country. I think that people in Britain are beginning to wake up a little and ask themselves serious questions about things like immigration, and that is surely a good sign. That the BBC are also asking questions is a very encouraging sign indeed.